Hello everyone, it is I, Mark S.W, and welcome to my third video for the Thomas the Tank Engine anniversary project. I hope you guys have been enjoying these adaptations and rewrites that I've been doing. So for the third book, I've dedicated it to Salty the Dockyard Diesel. Like Emily, Salty is another popular character in the TV series, but he doesn't have his own book. Because I think when he was introduced, he could have been maybe a replacement for Boko, the diesel engine. So I've written it in a way so we have both diesels. Before we begin, do please subscribe to my channel if you're new and hit the notification bell. And if you're one of those YouTubers who makes Thomas stories and you'd like to adapt these stories into something more visual, then you're more than welcome to. But please provide your own narration. Enjoy. Salty's Secret. The Fat Controller works his engines hard. They are very proud when he calls them really useful. Sometimes there's too much work to do. That's when he brings new engines to the railway. Salty the Dockyard Diesel is one of these engines, a friendly diesel shunter who loves to tell tales about the sea. We heaved until the old freighter caught the tide. It's good to be useful. Salty was excited that he was going to be working on the island of Sodor. As islands are surrounded by seas, he thought he'd be working at a harbour, or a port, or by the seaside. But for now, the inspector had told him to go to the China Clay Quarry at the end of Edward's branch line, where the twin engines Bill and Ben work. Ahoy, mateys! Salty, pride of the seven seas. I'm a new diesel and I'm here to lend you a wheel. Oh dear, said Bill cheekily. Another diesel. I thought the Fat Controller only preferred steam engines, added Ben. Welcome to the China Clay Quarry, said Edward proudly. Salty looked all around. Everywhere he looked, he saw nothing but rocks. A quarry? He exclaimed. There must be some mistake. I'm a dockyard diesel. You're a quarry diesel now, said Edward, and he explained that an important load of China clay was needed for a ship that would be sailing away on Friday. Salty was sad that he wouldn't be working by the sea, but he knew what it meant to be a really useful engine, and he set to work at once. Ah, well, he said, at least there be trucks. You better mind them, said Edward cautiously. They can be a bother. He won't last 5 minutes, sniggered Bill. Those trucks will trip him up soon enough, chuckled Ben. But to the twins' surprise, the trucks seemed to give Salty no trouble at all. He puffed backwards and forwards, shunting them into their proper places and singing a little song. Yo ho ho and a bucket of prawns, the thriller spins, sang Salty. And the captain yawns, sang the trucks. Thanks to Salty, the work was nearly done. Bill and Ben were surprised and a little jealous. Here comes Mr. Show-Off, grouched Bill that evening. You have to admit he's got a knack with those trucks, said Edward. Driver says he'll bore the bolts off us with his sea stories, huffed Ben. But Salty didn't say a word. He didn't come near the shed. Edward was worried and asked Salty what he was doing on his own. Oh, I thought I might catch a bit of sea breeze before I turn in. You really do miss the sea, don't you? Asked Edward. Said Salty, I do. But Salty knew the quarry work was important, so the next day he tried to show Bill and Ben his secret with the trucks. I like working to a musical rhythm, he said, and so do the trucks. Why don't you give it a try, me hearties? Here we go, here we go, here we go, sang Bill. No we don't, no we don't, no we don't, sang Ben. But try as they might, Bill and Ben could not move the trucks the way Salty could. That afternoon, the Fat Controller arrived. He was surprised to see the work was already done ahead of schedule. Well done, everyone, he said proudly. "We couldn't have done it without Salty, sir," said Edward. "All the credit should go to him." "In that case," said the Fat Controller, "I've got a bigger job for you, Salty." "Aye, aye, sir. What kind of a quarry am I going to?" "Quarry?" said the Fat Controller. "I'm sending you to Brendon Docks. I needed you here first because I couldn't spare another engine." "The docks!" Salty exclaimed. "Oh, thank you, sir. This reminds me of a time in Bimini." And Salty was telling stories again. Gordon takes a tumble. Salty loves working at Brendon Docks. He gets more work done than any 3 engines, and he soon met and became friends with Boko. Sometimes Edward lets Salty take goods trains from the docks to Wellsworth Station, where he could say hello to the other engines. At first, Salty was worried that the other engines might not like him, what with him being a diesel, but Edward and Boko promised to put in a good word for him. Soon all the engines became friends with Salty, and they enjoyed listening to his stories. All except Gordon. One day, Salty brought some trucks to the big station. He pushed them into a siding where Gordon and Percy were having a washdown. "Careful where you shunt those trucks," snorted Gordon. "You'll get my paint all dirty." "Pulling trucks is a dirty job," said Salty, "but then an engine like you wouldn't understand." "Of course not," Gordon huffed importantly. "Express engines don't pull trucks. It wouldn't be dignified." "What does dignified mean?" asked Percy. "Dignified," Gordon corrected. It means someone is too big for his buffers," teased Salty. "Pah!" said Gordon. Gordon used to pull the Express, but the Fat Controller gave the job to Pip and Emma. Nowadays he only pulls the Express if the 2 diesels are away or ill. He sometimes pulls the Special Express, but for now he only pulls ordinary passenger trains and sometimes goods trains. He felt his position deeply. One evening, fog covered the entire island. Everything slowed down, and the yard at Edward Station was full of trucks that Salty and Boko had brought from the docks. Soon they were running out of space. Edward was away pulling a late train, so he couldn't sort them out. The Fat Controller hurried to the sheds. "I want Henry, Donald, and Douglas to go to Wellsworth to sort the trucks out," he ordered. "Yes, sir," said the 3 engines. He then turned his attention to the big blue engine. "You too, Gordon. I need a strong engine to take the trucks where they won't be in the way." "Trucks!" huffed Gordon. He could not believe what he had heard. Gordon grumbled all the way to Edward Station. His driver and fireman told him to stop complaining, but he wouldn't. When he arrived, he waited impatiently for his long line of trucks to be shunted into place. Hurry up, he chuffed crossly. "Why the rush, Gordon?" asked Henry. "If I must pull trucks, then I'll show Salty how an express engine pulls trucks," puffed Gordon. "Careful, Captain," tooted Salty. "You don't want to get too big for your buffers." But Gordon ignored Salty. As soon as the guard blew his whistle and waved his green lantern, he set off with a big sulk. As the morning sun rose, Gordon was still pulling his long, heavy load. The fog was clearing, so now he could speed up a bit. "Now this is how you pull trucks," he puffed. Then there was trouble. As Gordon rattled through the next junction, he found himself changing direction. "That's strange," he thought. "I'm on the old branch line." He didn't know that the signalman was new and had accidentally left the point switched to a disused branch line. When he heard Gordon rocketing by, he looked out of the window. "Oh no," he cried. "Big engines aren't supposed to go that way." But it was too late. Gordon had already raced into the distance. The old branch line was weak, rusty, and full of difficult bends. There were signs warning all trains to go slow, but Gordon ignored the signs. "I'm an express engine, I don't go slow," he said, and he went even faster. The branch line couldn't take his weight. The rails creaked and buckled under his wheels. Finally, with a groan and a crack, the rails snapped. "Oh!" Gordon cried as he tumbled off the track and into a muddy field. Luckily, the driver, fireman and guard had jumped clear, but all the goods had spilled out everywhere, and Gordon was sitting in the field, his wheels deep in mud. In front of him was a scarecrow with a mocking grin. He felt very undignified. "What will the Fat Controller say?" Gordon thought. When the breakdown gang arrived, he found out soon enough. "Well, Gordon," said the Fat Controller, "you wanted to show Salty a thing or two, and you've certainly done that. You've shown him how silly it is to ignore go slow signs." "Sorry, sir," said Gordon, and he let out a sad wheeze of steam. Peace and quiet. While Gordon was being repaired, the Fat Controller decided to get another engine, one who wouldn't complain about pulling trucks. A few weeks later, the engine arrived. He was a long, tender engine with 10 drive wheels and an orange coat of paint. The Fat Controller introduced him to the other engines. "This is Murdoch. He's going to be pulling freights along the main line." "Ahoy, Murdoch," said Salty. The other engines gave Murdoch a welcome too. "You're a chatty lot," Murdoch said quietly. Soon Murdoch was coupled to a long, long line of heavy trucks. His boiler bubbled, his wheels slowly turned, and the mighty engine chuffed away. When Murdoch worked on the other railway, he used to pull goods from one city to the other. This meant puffing through the countryside, which he loved because it was so peaceful and quiet. When the diesels took over, he was bought by a small private railway line that wanted to preserve steam engines. He missed having long runs, which was why he was delighted when the Fat Controller had purchased him. Murdoch was looking forward to a long run through the Sodor countryside, but unfortunately, his first train journey took him around the industrial areas, which were noisy and smelly. At the end of the day, Murdoch stayed at Edward Station with Boko and Salty. He was looking forward to a good night's sleep, but the two diesels were full of questions. "What's the longest train you've ever pulled? Have you worked miles, Ali? Have you ever crashed?" "Please," Murdoch said, "I want some peace and quiet, and I don't want to share a shed with diesels who are chatterboxes." "No need to be rude," huffed Boko. "We're only being friendly, matey," added Salty. The next morning, Murdoch collected another long, heavy train. This time he chuffed into the countryside. It was splendid. "This is more like it," he puffed. At last, he had some peace and quiet. Just then, he saw something in the distance. It looked like there was something on the line. "Poop, poop," he whistled. "Brakes, guard, please." The driver applied the brakes, and the train slowed down. As they got nearer to the objects, they could see what they were. A flock of sheep had escaped from a field through a broken fence. Murdoch's driver and fireman tried to chase the sheep back through the fence. First this way, then that way. They tried everything, but the sheep wouldn't go the way they wanted them to go. "We'll never move these sheep by ourselves," complained the fireman. "I'll go and phone for help," sighed the driver. Murdoch was unhappy. The noisy sheep were spoiling his peace and quiet. The Fat Controller was having tea when he got the call. "Poor Murdoch," he chuckled. "I'll send Toby to collect the farmer. This is a job for an engine with cow catchers and side plates." The sheep were becoming noisier and noisier. "Please stop," groaned Murdoch. "I'd rather be back with the Chatterbox Diesels." At last Toby came into view. "Cheer up, Murdoch," he said. "I've brought the farmer. It won't be long now." Before long, the farmer and his dog went to work. The sheep were soon safely back in their field, and Murdoch puffed happily away. Murdoch soon completed his journey, late but safe. He did 3 more journeys, pulling more long trains. He passed the field where the sheep were grazing. The fence was mended, so he had no more trouble from them, but he could still hear the baaing. That evening he stayed with Boko and Salty again. This time he spoke first. "I'm sorry I was cross," he chuffed. "I'm very pleased to share a shed with you." "And we're pleased to have your company," said Boko. "Aye, we are," added Salty. "It reminds me of a story." Murdoch smiled. The sound of bar, bar, bar would have kept him up all night, but a Salty story would send him happily to sleep. Salty's Stormy Tale. As the months passed, Bill and Ben were growing even more fond of Salty. They were so fond of him that they started copying the way he talked. One hot summer's day, Salty overheard them. "Those be dark clouds, matey," called Bill. "Aye, there be a fierce storm on the way, Captain," cried Ben. Salty thought that they were making fun of him, and this made him sad. Even Edward heard the twins talking like sailors. "I know they can be silly and naughty sometimes," he said soothingly to Salty, "but their hearts are in the right places." "Maybe so," said Salty, "but I think I'd like to be somewhere else at the moment." "Tell you what," suggested Edward, "I'll do your work at the docks. Why don't you go and pick up Trevor? He's been working at the seaside all day. It will take too long for him to get back to the orchard all by himself." "Aye, aye, matey," said Salty, cheering up a bit. So their drivers made the arrangements, and Salty set off with a low loader coupled to him. Later that day, the blue sky was eaten away by dark clouds. Edward and the twins had just finished their work when the first rumble of thunder and flash of lightning began. While they took shelter in the shed, Edward had stern words about the way the twins had been copying Salty. "We weren't insulting him, honest," said Bill. "We were only copying him because we think he's grand," said Ben. "He's very helpful and wise, just like you and Boko, only he tells exciting stories." "Nevertheless," said Edward severely, "I want you two to apologize to Salty when he gets back." But Edward was worried. "I hope he'll be all right," he thought as he looked at the sky. Salty arrived safely at the seaside where Trevor was waiting for him. "Right on time," congratulated Trevor. "Aye, but the storm is approaching fast," said Salty. "We better get moving." Trevor chuffed onto the low loader, and when he was secured, they set off. Salty was right about the storm. It was a fierce one. He was fighting his way through the stinging wind and rain. His route would pass by a lighthouse, which helped to keep the ships away from the rocks when they were coming to and from Brendon Docks. Although Salty was finding it difficult to see, he knew he should be able to see the light from the house. But there was nothing. He was concerned. "Why isn't the light working?" he cried over the howling wind. His driver was worried too. "There must be a problem with the lamp," he said. Then they saw a red lantern ahead. It was the lighthouse keeper waving at them to stop. "The lighthouse lamp has gone out," he explained. "The generator is broken." Salty suddenly had an idea. "Trevor has a flywheel. It could power the generator, but we must hurry." Trevor was unloaded and his flywheel was attached to the generator shaft. Suddenly, they heard a loud horn from a distant ship. Without the lighthouse, it was steaming towards the rocks. "Keep going, Trevor! Keep going!" Salty encouraged. Trevor was working as fast as he could. Finally, the generator came back to life. The lighthouse beam shone across the stormy seas once again. "We've done it!" the lighthouse keeper called. "The ship is turning! She's out of danger!" Salty's idea had saved the day. Eventually, the storm passed and Trevor worked hard until first light. Salty took him back to the orchard and then chugged back to the docks. He was surprised to see a crowd of people waiting for him. They gave him a hero's welcome with cheers and claps. "Thank you," said a sea captain. "You saved my ship and crew." "Well done, Salty," boomed the Fat Controller. "You are a very wise and heroic engine." Bill and Ben cheered for Salty as well and said that they were sorry. "Say no more, me hearties," replied Salty happily. "Now we can work together and have fun at the same time. And I'll tell you about my stormy tale tonight." Thanks for watching this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed the stories. If you did, then do give this video a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and hit the bell icon, and you can follow me on my social sites. I'll see you next time. Over and out.